They say that marriage is a partnership, a union of two people who hold hands and go through life together, supporting each other in joy and sorrow, in health and in sickness. And I always believed in it because my union with Gaston was built on exactly that foundation until his family intervened in our lives and decided otherwise, as if what we had created and cherished suddenly turned out to be alien and unreliable. My name is Laura, and although the years have not yet managed to leave deep marks on my face, my soul has already accumulated a lot of experience because at 35 years old, I have managed to build a life that any woman could be proud of. I live in Boston, a city where gray rains give way to bright light and ancient streets intertwine with the rhythm of modern life. And for 5 years now, I have been running my own fashion brand, which once began with simple drawings on the kitchen table and grew into a successful business with 30 employees, national distribution, and regular publications in prestigious New England publications. I am used to working long hours, being tired to the point of exhaustion, but at the same time, every time I experience that special joy when you see how your dream takes shape and inspires others. My husband Gaston, the same age and once a brilliant pastry chef, a man with thin fingers and a quiet character, knew how to turn sugar and flour into small works of art. But a few years ago, his life changed. Doctors diagnosed him with a rare autoimmune disease because of which he could no longer spend days on his feet and work at the same pace. Then we sat down to talk, seriously, honestly, until late at night, as only two close people can talk, and decided that I would focus on business and he would take care of the house, all those little things that usually go unnoticed, but which make up the comfort and rhythm of everyday life. And I must say, this decision turned out to be a saving one. Gaston cooked, cleaned, folded towels, took care of the little things, and our house was full of his care, and I could immerse myself in work, knowing that he was nearby and everything was under control. We lived in a spacious 4-room apartment in a house in the South End, an apartment that was the embodiment of a long-standing dream for us. High windows, polished wooden floors, an exquisite kitchen where every corner kept the smells and memories of our evenings together. The rent was $5,300 a month, but all the bills were in my name. All the furniture, every vase and fabric was chosen by me, paid for by me, and I felt proud that I could give us such a space. But none of that mattered the day she walked into our lives. Julia, Gaston's older sister, a woman of 43, and in all these years, she had never learned to take responsibility for herself, much less for others, because she was sure that the world owed her an easy road, simply for the fact that she was breathing. She rushed from one man to another, changed cities, jobs, and in the end always returned to her father's house with a new complaint, a new excuse, and with an air of support from everyone around her. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and to be honest, I wasn't longing for the reunion. But one rainy Friday night, she showed up at our door with 2 suitcases on wheels and a smug smile that didn't bode well. "Hi, little brother," she sang, walking past Gaston as if she owned the apartment, and added, "I hope you don't mind. I just need a softer place to land." Gaston was taken aback, unable to find the strength to respond, and I froze in the doorway, still holding the keys in my hand, and said reservedly, "Hello, Julia. What brings you to Boston?" "Well, you know, men. Mistakes, the usual," she grinned, kicking off her shoes and lounging on the couch. "Just for a few days, I promise." But her "a few days" stretched on. By the second week, she was feeling like a full-fledged hostess. She'd taken over the guest room, started ordering groceries to our address using my Prime account, and acted like she was doing us a favor by handing us little trinkets from the thrift stores. "It must be so nice," she said one morning as she watched me get ready for work, "being the breadwinner while your husband folds the tea towels." I looked at Gaston, but he looked away. Julia gradually began to change the decor. She moved the furniture, brought in cheap decorations that clashed with our interior, and one day I came home to find the guest bathroom painted lavender. "Please," was all she said when I walked in. Gaston didn't stop her, only whispered later that he didn't want to provoke a conflict, that she was going through a difficult period, and asked her to just let her settle in, because this was all temporary. But I knew, for Julia, nothing is temporary. By the third week, she had already begun to hint that our house would suit her parents. "This layout is just perfect for Mom and Dad," she said, sipping wine at 11 in the morning. "And you could rent something smaller, a cozy 2-room, a new beginning." "You're kidding, right?" I laughed, but her eyes were too serious. "Laura, this place is huge. You don't need that much space, and Mom is tired of the suburbs." I said nothing, and Gaston rubbed his forehead and went into the kitchen. But the last straw was the day I came home early and found cardboard boxes in the living room, neatly folded, as if the move had been planned without my knowledge. They contained my clothes, my shoes and scarves, my things, my entire life, folded by someone else's hands. Gaston was standing by the couch, holding one of my shoes as if it were a weapon, and Julia, sitting on the couch with a glass of Chardonnay and her phone, didn't even look up. "Hey," she said indifferently, "I thought I'd help you start packing. Mom and Dad are moving next weekend. We need to make room." I stood stock still, as if the ground beneath my feet had suddenly turned to cold stone, unable to believe what I was hearing. Julia finally looked up, her eyes gleaming with a cheeky light, and with a lazy grin she said, "Well, obviously my parents need a master bedroom. They're not going to be hiding in this little guest room. They're in their 60s. They should be comfortable." It took me a moment to find my voice, but when the words finally came out, they were filled with disbelief. "Are you seriously planning on moving them in here?" As if she'd been waiting for this question, she grinned and drawled, "It's not even a move, more of a transition." I told them they could start moving things in this weekend. "Oh, and I've ordered a cleaning crew to give your office a thorough cleaning so I can turn it into my dad's office." My office. Those 4 walls where collections were born, which later graced the pages of magazines, the space I filled with my work and imagination, suddenly turned into someone's office. I said slowly, "You're talking about my office." "Where I run my company." Gaston took a step forward as if to say something, but Julia interrupted abruptly. "You'll find yourself a new place, maybe even a job closer to Way. You're resourceful. You can handle it." I looked from her to Gaston, and my heart sank. He looked like a ghost, gray, burned out, weak-willed. "You're throwing me out of my own home," I whispered. Julia rolled her eyes as if she were watching a cheap scene. "Stop being dramatic. This isn't your home. It's a rental. Calm down." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my temples, and I hurried to the bedroom, as if looking for proof that I still belonged there. But even there, a cold blow awaited me. Boxes lined the wall, half the closet was empty, and the photos were gone from the nightstand. When I returned, Gaston was sitting on the arm of the sofa, his hands shaking, trying to explain something. I tried to stop her, honestly. I wanted everything to be calm. "She packed my things," I said in a strangled voice. He looked at me, and his eyes reflected helplessness. I didn't know what to do. Julia, meanwhile, stood up, stretched sweetly, and added with a satisfied look, "I told my mother that tomorrow I'll go on FaceTime with her, show her the house. She's delighted. She keeps repeating that this place is just perfect. Oh yeah, and the manager has already given me a guest pass, so it's practically official." She came up to me, smiling like the cat that swallowed the canary, and drawled, "You're strong, Laura." "You'll get up. Think of this as a transition, as a rebalancing. You know yourself that you're living too big." I looked at her and didn't allow myself to scream or cry or even let my voice shake. I didn't blink. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out a red folder, and opened it right in front of them. The original lease was in there. My name, my signatures, my initials on every page. Julia burst out laughing. "Oh, come on, you think I'm going to be scared by a piece of paper?" I closed the folder and for the first time that evening allowed myself to smile. "No, Julia." "But consequences matter." Gaston looked up, a glimmer of hope on his face, but Julia's smile faltered. "You want the apartment?" I asked calmly. "Take it." "What?" Her eyes widened. I walked over to the coat rack, grabbed a bunch of keys, and threw them on the coffee table with a thud. "Just don't forget to pay next month's rent." She blinked, her voice hesitant. "You're leaving?" I turned to the door. "I'm making room." "That's what you wanted, isn't it?" Gaston jumped up. "Laura, wait!" But I was already striding toward the exit, ahead of the gathering storm, not wanting to stop for a second. He called me 5 times that night, but I didn't answer. I took a room in a hotel in the center, allowing myself only 1 night of silence, and then drove to Cambridge to my parents' house. I hadn't lived there since college, but when I showed up on their doorstep with my laptop and a small bag, my mother only said quietly, "Your old room is clean. I'll put on the tea." No questions, no reproaches, just silence and clarity, in which my heart found temporary refuge. The next morning, sitting on the back porch with a hot cup of coffee, I logged into the tenant portal and filed a 30-day notice to terminate the lease. Technically, I didn't have to wait since I was the only tenant and there were no sublease clauses in the document. But I wanted them to have time to settle in, to feel confident in their victory, to feel like they were in control. Let them build illusions, because I knew that the story was far from over. 2 days later, my phone vibrated with a message from the manager. "Hello, Laura. I confirm that you will be moving out at the end of the month. There are already 3 new people living in the apartment. Should I expect their names for the lease?" I smiled as I typed the reply. "The lease is not transferable. I will hand over the keys and completely vacate the apartment." And from that moment on, the clock began to tick. The countdown began. Gaston finally got through to me. Late one night, his text came. "I didn't agree to any of this." I panicked. "Please, let's talk." We met in a small coffee shop in the South End on neutral ground. He looked haggard, thinner, his hands visibly shaking as he held his cup, and in a quiet voice he said, "I'm sorry." I should have stopped her, but she's loud, and my mom listens to her. I didn't know how to say no. "You didn't even try," I said, and the words hung in the air, heavy and bitter. He nodded, his eyes glistening with moisture, as if he were trying to hold on to something that could no longer be held. "You left like it was over, like you could give up on what we'd spent years building." "You cornered my life, and it wasn't me who did it, it was her." I felt a wave of pain building in my chest, and I couldn't help but say, "You watched her pack my things and stood by while she told me that my house wasn't mine." Gaston closed his eyes, whispering something barely audible. "I never said that." "You shouldn't have left," but I heard more in his silence than in his words. I leaned toward him, cold and decisive. "I'm breaking the lease. You have a month. After that, it's over." His eyes widened, panic flickering in them. "You're canceling everything?" "Yes," I said. He was about to object, but I interrupted him. "I know what Julia is thinking." "So, let her go." When I returned to the apartment a few days later, I saw that the situation had only escalated. Over the weekend, Julia had thrown a kind of welcome breakfast for her parents, as if this were her territory, her kingdom. Neighbors later told me it was loud and tacky, the clinking of glasses, the loud speeches and announcements like, "We're renovating this hallway," and "This has always been asking for a reading nook." They posed on the balcony like the new owners, daffodils in nesting mode, and someone even took a photo of the 3 of them standing together, Julia between her parents, wine glasses in hand, smiling smugly but shamelessly. The photo appeared on Instagram with the caption, "Starting a new chapter in our lives. Boston is finally our home." I took a screenshot and filed it away, because I knew the time wasn't right yet, but it would come. Gaston and I barely spoke during those weeks, but I could see the weight on him. One of my former co-workers who lived in the same building broke the news to me, casually, in the elevator. She said that my parents had officially moved out, that Julia had taken over the master bedroom, and Gaston had been relegated to the tiny guest room, as if he were a random lodger. She had turned my office into a yoga studio, even though she had never practiced, and when asked why, she said, "For atmosphere." That evening, I received a short text from a friend. "I let this happen." And she added, "They think you've given up." But I knew the truth. I had let them decorate, take pictures, host, and brag, only to strengthen the illusion, to make the fall harder. A few days before the end of the month, I called the manager and told him that a full inspection of the apartment would be necessary because it had to be vacated by Friday. He hesitated, carefully asked, "What about the other tenants?" I answered calmly, "There won't be any other tenants." And then Friday came. Early in the morning at 8:14, my phone rang. Julia was on the screen. She didn't even say hello. Her voice was sharp, almost a scream. "What the hell is going on?" I took a sip of tea, smiled, and answered, "Good morning to you too." She was almost choking with rage. The manager told me that we have to vacate the apartment. He said that the tenant is terminating the lease. "That's right," I confirmed. "That's not right." "I already completed the paperwork 2 weeks ago," I reminded calmly. Her voice pierced the speaker, high and brittle. "You have to fix this." "We live here?" "No," I said coldly. "You lived here, and the lease was always in my name only." She thrashed around like a caged animal and finally blurted out, "But the furniture is yours, and Gaston didn't sign anything." I paused, then said, "Exactly. He didn't sign anything." There was a long silence, and then I heard her take a sharp breath. "Do you have any idea how much it would cost to find a new place to live in a place like this?" "About $5,300 a month, if you're lucky," I said without a trace of emotion. Julia's voice shook. "We sold the house." My parents put everything they had into this move. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temples. "Then you should have thought twice before stealing someone else's house." "But you left," she screamed. I took a deep breath. "No, I let you dig your own hole." I heard sobs on the other end of the line, then her parents' voices muffled and angry. My father talked about real estate fraud. My mother repeated that Julia had assured them the apartment was hers. Then her voice again. "Gaston knew. He didn't do anything to stop it." I answered coldly, "He didn't write a check. It was all mine." There was a thick silence and then a desperate whisper. "Then what do we do now?" I let the silence stretch and then said softly, "You could always take up yoga." "You already have a studio," and I disconnected the call. I wasn't going back there. I didn't need it. That evening, a video came from a neighbor I barely knew who had once complimented my shoes in the elevator. The recording showed Julia yelling at the building manager in the hallway, her voice breaking into a shriek. My mother was sitting on the steps, flushed from the heat, holding a houseplant in her lap as if it were their last talisman. My father paces in circles, asking the same question over and over, "Where should we put our stuff?" And Gaston stands off to the side, hands in his jacket pockets, silent as if he weren't even there. The caption on the video read, "And here I thought Boston was expensive because of the views." I watched it once, saved it, then deleted it. Endings aren't always loud. Sometimes they're the quiet click of a closed folder. That weekend, my parents and I helped Gaston move into the small guest house behind their main house in the garden, and it felt like a strange return to the beginning, to something simple and humble, as if life itself had decided to return him to an apprenticeship where he had to learn everything all over again. Yes, Gaston. He called me 2 days after they received the eviction notice, and there was no smugness in his voice, no requests or demands, just a quiet, almost resigned speech. "I made a mistake," he said then, and I could almost feel how hard it was for him to say it. I let them speak for me. I couldn't help but respond with the bitterness that had built up inside me. "Have you ever said anything for me?" He didn't argue, didn't make excuses, and only after a long pause did he say, "I don't deserve to come back." I looked out the window where the garden floated in the golden light of the sunset and said, "No, you don't." But then, almost immediately, he added, "I still love you, and I'll prove it." even if I have to start with the garden shed. So we started small. He lived in this small house, and I gave him space and time to show that he could change. We met in the evenings. Sometimes we had dinner together on the porch, and he cooked again, just for the two of us, without an audience and without promises. I sensed that there was still a lot of weakness in him. His health was up and down, but each dish he brought to the table was like a small step toward restoring what had once been destroyed. There were no expectations, no vows, only gifts, simple and sincere. Meanwhile, Julia, according to friends, sank deeper into chaos. Rumor had it that she tried to persuade the manager to sign a new lease in her name, promising to overpay and assuring him that she could do everything better than everyone else. But then it turned out that the rent was more than $5,000 a month, and she gave in. She tried to get her parents to sign the papers and be guarantors, but they had just sold their house, investing everything in her gamble, and the money had been spent on moving, furniture, flashy outfits for her new life, and endless social media posts. No savings, no safety net. And when the lease wasn't renewed and the eviction deadline came, they had nowhere to go, not even a cheap motel. One day, I opened my email and saw a photo. Julia, wearing a work apron, stood behind the counter of a 24-hour diner near South Station, her face tired, her eyes dull. Her mother sat at a table in the far corner, eating hash browns, and her father, in the corner, mopping the floor, bent over as if weighed down not just by the mop, but by all the mistakes their family had made. The caption read, "Looks like the city didn't welcome them the way they expected." I didn't laugh. I felt neither gloating nor satisfaction. I simply closed my laptop because sometimes the universe itself takes over the hard work you no longer have the strength to do. A month later, Gaston moved out of the guest house and into a small rented place just 2 blocks away. He insisted on paying for it himself from the small inheritance he had inherited from his uncle. "I need to prove that I'm not just someone other people take care of," he said. "I don't want to be your shadow anymore." For the first time, I heard firmness in his voice, not pleading. He wasn't asking for me to take him back. He was asking for a chance to grow, and I realized I needed the same. We started going to therapy, separately at first, then together. We didn't call it reconciliation, we called it reconstruction, because we had to build not an old house on the old ruins, but a new one, albeit similar, but with different supports and different walls. And the apartment? I let it go. It was beautiful, with high windows and a view that amazed in the mornings, but its walls had absorbed too much poison, too much alien energy. I put my bonus into a down payment on another apartment, sunny, quiet, in Beacon Hill. There were no excesses there, but my breath, my rhythm were there. I furnished it slowly, lovingly, choosing every detail. Gaston only helped hang one picture, but did not unpack anything else. He understood that now the space should belong to me. A few months later, I accidentally met Julia. I was leaving a fabric store near the station, and she was leaving a quick loan center, which was just 2 houses further. At first she didn't notice me, but then her gaze fell on me and her face froze. I smiled politely, but she said nothing, just turned away and walked away, her heels scuffed, her bag frayed and hanging on by a thread. I felt neither triumphant nor bitter at that moment. I felt it was over, really, deeply, peacefully. That evening, Gaston joined me at dinner. I served roast pumpkin and honey-glazed salmon, and he put the teapot on the table. "You're quiet today," he said, looking into my eyes. I nodded. I saw her. He didn't bother to specify who. He didn't need to. "Have you spoken to her?" he asked. "No," I said, but for the first time, I didn't want to. He held out his hand to me and suddenly said, "You know, I'm still thinking about the way she called you a parasite." I laughed. "It's funny because I was paying all the bills while she was sucking up her parents' pension." "She thought she won," he added. "She didn't even play the game," I said. "She just stole the bill." We fell silent, sitting in a silence that was more peaceful than any words. I leaned back in my chair and said, People think power is about control and owning things, but real power is knowing when to step back and let the trap close behind you,